The drifters hesitated, but Wade's unwavering colt and Ayana's blazing presence left no room for defiance. Slowly, reluctantly, the man holding her dress cast it to the ground between them. Ayana bent gracefully to reclaim her belongings, her movements flowing like water despite the trembling in her hands. Not from fear, but from the sweet surge of victory coursing through her blood. She straightened with her arms full of buckskin and beadwork, her chin high as a queen's. "If you ever touch what is not yours again," she said, her voice carrying across the desert like thunder before lightning, "if you dishonor any woman of any people, the earth itself will rise up to swallow you." The drifters pressed back against their saddles, suddenly small beneath the weight of her words. None dared speak. Wade kept his gun steady until Ayana had gathered everything, then slowly lowered it. "Best you boys find another territory," he said quietly. "This one's got teeth." Without another glance at the cowed men, he turned to Ayana. She stood transformed. No longer the vulnerable woman they had found by the creek, but a force of nature clothed in dignity and strength. The borrowed shirt still covered her, but now it seemed like royal robes. Together they walked back to the paint mare, leaving the drifters to contemplate their narrow escape from justice. As they rode away from the clearing, Ayana clutched her recovered belongings, but made no move to change from the blue shirt. "You could have claimed credit," she said as the canyon opened wide before them. "Told them you alone drove them off." Wade's weathered hands held the reins steady. "Wouldn't have been true," he replied simply. "You faced them down same as me, maybe more." For the first time in many seasons, Ayana felt something beyond mere survival stirring in her chest. Trust, fragile as a desert flower, but real as the stone beneath her feet. This rancher had not stolen her thunder or claimed her victory. He had simply stood beside her while she reclaimed what was hers. As they rode side by side across the vast Arizona landscape, she knew their paths, though different as night and day, had become entwined by the silvery thread of mutual respect. The creek had taken her peace, but given her an unexpected ally, and perhaps in time, something more precious than either had dared hope to find. For the first time since laughter had shattered her peace, the tight band around Ayana's chest loosened. She studied this unlikely ally, the weathered rancher who had come not with mockery but with covering, offering partnership instead of pity. He stood waiting without pressing, neither demanding trust nor dismissing her strength. In that patient stillness, she glimpsed something rare, a man who understood that true power came not from taking, but from choosing when to give. The desert wind whispered through sage and mesquite, carrying silence between them, like a bridge neither had expected to find. And Ayana knew, with the certainty of storm clouds gathering on distant mountains, that their paths had converged for reasons the spirits alone could fathom. "We ride," she said at last, her voice carrying the authority of ancient bloodlines. Wade's pale eyes held hers for a long moment, reading the steel beneath her quiet words. "We ride," he agreed, and swung back into his saddle. The trail was easy to follow. Boot prints pressed deep into sandy earth, careless as the men who'd made them. These drifters moved like conquerors through land that had never been theirs, drunk on casual cruelty, and certain no reckoning would find them. Ayana rode behind Wade on the paint mare, her bare legs pressed against warm horsehide, her hands gripping his belt as they followed the clear sign. Her hair had dried in the desert air, flowing like black silk across her shoulders. The silver ornaments caught sunlight as they moved, marking her as daughter of chiefs, even in borrowed clothing. "What do they call you?" Wade asked over his shoulder, his voice respectful as if names were sacred things not to be stolen. She considered lying, giving him some false title to protect her true identity. but something in his careful courtesy stayed her tongue. "Ayana," she said finally, letting the syllables roll like water over stone. Wade repeated it softly, as though committing it to memory alongside other treasures. The sound of her name in his mouth was strange, foreign accent wrapping around familiar music, yet she found no mockery in it. The trail wound through a narrow draw between red sandstone cliffs, and voices drifted on the still air. Rough laughter, crude jokes, the sounds of men who believed themselves beyond consequence. Ayana's jaw clenched as anger flared fresh in her chest. Wade raised his hand, signaling silence, and they dismounted together. He secured the paint to a stunted juniper, while Ayana crept forward on silent feet, her Navajo training making her invisible among the shadows and stone. The drifters had made camp in a small clearing, their horses hobbled carelessly nearby. A meager fire crackled between them while they passed a bottle and boasted of their afternoon's entertainment. One waved her buckskin dress like a trophy, drawing fresh peals of laughter from his companions. Rage poured through Ayana's veins like liquid fire. She wanted to charge forward, to tear back what was hers with her bare hands. But Wade's steady presence beside her was an anchor, his pale eyes calculating as he studied their enemies. "3 of them," he murmured, "armed, but careless. They won't expect visitors." He stepped into the clearing with boots crunching on gravel, his Colt already in his hand, though not yet raised. The laughter died instantly, replaced by startled curses as the drifters scrambled for their weapons. "Evening, boys," Wade said, his voice calm as still water. "You've taken something that doesn't belong to you." Before they could fully rise, Ayana emerged from the shadows like an avenging spirit. The borrowed shirt hung to her thighs, but she wore it like war paint, proud, dangerous, unbroken. Her obsidian eyes blazed with the fire of her ancestors as she faced the men who had thought her helpless. "That belongs to me," she said, her voice ringing clear against the canyon walls. Each word carried the weight of mountains, the authority of bloodlines stretching back to the dawn of time. The drifters shifted uneasily, their earlier bravado crumbling under her fierce gaze. They had expected a victim, not a warrior princess demanding justice. One of them, a grizzled man with tobacco-stained teeth, attempted a sneer. "Now see here, Injun gal, we was just having a little fun." The metallic click of Wade's hammer being cocked cut through his words like a blade. "I'd choose my next words real careful," the rancher warned, his voice soft as silk and twice as dangerous. "The lady's not asking twice." The man's throat worked soundlessly, his false courage withering under the twin threats of steel and righteous fury. Ayana stepped forward, her bare feet silent on the packed earth. "Throw them," she commanded, pointing at her stolen garments. "Now." The creek wound through the valley like a ribbon of gold, its clear waters dancing over smooth stones beneath the Arizona sun. Ayana had sought refuge there, away from the smoke and chatter of her tribe's camp, craving solitude where only the murmur of flowing water and the whisper of cottonwood leaves could reach her ears. She had slipped from her buckskin dress and moccasins, leaving them carefully arranged on a flat boulder while she waded into the cool embrace of the stream. The water rose to her waist as she moved deeper, letting its coolness wash away the dust and heat of the long desert day. But her peace shattered like glass against stone when harsh laughter erupted from the brush. Dark figures burst from their hiding places, 3 drifters with sunburned faces, twisted by cruel amusement. Before she could cry out or flee, they had seized her clothing, whooping like coyotes as they retreated into the scrub oak and mesquite. Their jeers echoed off the canyon walls, leaving her trembling in the shallows. Arms wrapped protectively across her chest, The silver ornaments in her dark hair caught the late sunlight as she crouched deeper into the water, her obsidian eyes burning with humiliation and rage. Ayana was no stranger to hardship. Her Navajo people had weathered countless storms, soldiers, settlers, the endless hunger of outsiders who devoured everything sacred. But this violation cut deeper than raids or broken treaties. To be stripped of dignity in such a manner, left defenseless in her own ancestral lands, it was an affront that blazed in her chest like a coal. Yet pursuit was impossible. Naked and weaponless in the open desert, she could only press herself against the creek bank, her breathing sharp and shallow as her mind raced through impossible options. The sound of approaching hoofbeats froze her blood, steady and purposeful, growing louder with each heartbeat. She sank deeper into the water, praying the cottonwoods might conceal her from this new threat. The horse materialized first, a paint mare with intelligent eyes, followed by its rider. A tall rancher sat easy in the saddle, his broad-brimmed hat casting shadows across a face weathered by years under the open sky. A gun belt rode his hips, and a rifle rested in its scabbard, speaking of a man who'd learned to defend what mattered. In his weathered hands he carried a heavy wool shirt, faded blue from countless washings. His pale eyes found her instantly, despite her attempts to hide beneath the rippling surface. But unlike the drifters, his gaze held no mockery or hunger, only a quiet recognition of injustice. "Appears you've been wronged, miss," he said, his voice carrying the slow cadence of Texas plains. "No call for such treatment in decent country." Ayana remained silent, her full lips pressed tight with suspicion. Ranchers brought nothing but trouble to her people, fences and cattle, soldiers and broken promises. Yet this one offered no weapon, made no move to dismount, only held out the blue shirt like a peace offering. "They took my clothes," she said finally, the words sharp with barely controlled fury. "They thought it sport." Her chin lifted in defiance, even as vulnerability threatened to drown her, for she would show no weakness before any white man. The rancher nodded once, as if such cruelty was an old enemy he'd faced before. He dismounted slowly, approaching the creek bank with careful steps. "Take this," he said, extending the shirt. "Nobody deserves to be left unprotected in country this hard." She studied him through narrowed eyes, searching for the trap hidden in his kindness. But she found no leering satisfaction, no cruel pleasure in her shame. Cautiously, she moved through the water toward him, every step weighted with wariness. He turned his head respectfully aside as she snatched the garment and pulled it over her head. The rough cotton fell to her thighs, modest covering that felt like armor after her exposure. She clutched the fabric with gratitude she couldn't voice. When she stood dripping on the sandy bank, the shirt hanging loose on her slender frame, the rancher straightened to his full height. He didn't smile, only met her wary gaze with something that might have been understanding. "Name's Wade Garrison," he said after a silence that stretched like the desert horizon. "I reckon you've been wronged by men who forgot their raising. If you'll have it, I'll see they learn some manners." She shook her dark head sharply. "I need no saving. I need justice." The words carried flame, but beneath ran a tremor of truth. Alone, she could not strike back at those who had shamed her people's daughter. Wade's expression softened around the edges, though his jaw remained firm. "Justice is earned by standing up," he replied, "but sometimes it takes two hands to hold it steady."